Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and I'm coming to you live from my one-bedroom apartment in Western Maryland. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad. Thank you for listening. Before we begin our first interview, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself and our show. I'm a band director in South Central Pennsylvania and have been teaching for 4 years. I first became interested in the topic of leadership a few years ago after digging into the teachings of John Maxwell and have always wondered how different band, choir, and orchestra directors approached leading their programs. With the growth of professional development podcasts for music teachers over the past few years, I felt that this would be a great medium to share the ideas and insight of music educators and school leaders discussing their ideas towards approaching leadership in a music program. Our first guest is Mr. Scott Sheehan. Scott is the band director at Hollidaysburg Area Senior High School in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. In addition to his work as a director, Scott has also served as a leader at the state and national levels for the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association and the National Association for Music Education. Recently, Scott has received the distinction of being named as a semifinalist for the 2018 Grammy Music Educator Award. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Oh, no, my pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Before we begin and kind of get into your experience with your teaching at Hollidaysburg and some of your work as a national and state advocate for music education, first, if you could tell us a little bit about your work experience when you started out and your educational background.
Sure. I went to Clarion University for my undergraduate degrees, and I actually have a degree in music education and a degree in music marketing. It was an interesting story where I went home and told my parents that I wanted to be a musician, and they said, "Oh, that's funny, a magician. That's nice." and it was an interesting go-around. So they wanted me to have a backup plan. So they thought the business degree would be good. And honestly, it paid off a lot because when I interviewed and got my first teaching job at Bald Eagle Area High School in central Pennsylvania, the principal actually told me that having that marketing degree was a benefit in my application and in my interviewing process. They were looking to build a program. And so when I started my career at Bald Eagle Area, there were 33 students on the band roster. And I showed up about 3 days after I was hired for a summer parade, and 13 students showed up. So it was quite an experience in those early years. But I will say through that summer, we did a lot of recruiting, a lot of pizza parties, and a lot of talking to parents and students. And we were able to put 76 students on the field that first fall. And that was really exciting. And that was about maybe 25, 30 more kids than had been in the band previously. So they were very excited. Now, I will say in those early years, the band may not have sounded as good as I thought it did. I was starting out my career, and certainly, there's a lot of new kids in the band. So we were kind of growing together, which was wonderful because I had a lot of support from the administration, and it was just an amazing time for me to grow. And very quickly in my career, I connected with Dennis Glocke at Penn State University, and I knew that early on that there was a lot that I needed to know more about. And so Dennis became a wonderful mentor and a tremendous conducting teacher. And so through my work with him, I learned a lot about what I didn't know. And that proved to be very, very beneficial for me. So after teaching at Bald Eagle Area for a few years, I started a master's program at Penn State in music education. And that went on, it took me a little while to finish that, which I might talk about later, but I did get a master's in music education from Penn State. and taught for 8 years at Bald Eagle area. And at the end of those 8 years, it wasn't necessarily that I was looking to leave Bald Eagle, because the program grew. And so I told you I started with 13 in that first parade, and when I left, there were 188 students making music in the band program, and that was grades 7 through 12. So that was a junior high band, and then a 9 through 12 high school band. And of those, there were about 135 that were part of the marching band. We marched some eighth graders and with the high school kids, and so there were about 135 in the marching band, and like I said, 188 when I left there. So it was a really great time to grow the program, provide great experiences for the students. While I was there, we were able to host Maynard Ferguson and his Big Bop Nouveau band there. We had the Mike Vax Big Band, which was the Stan Kenton alumni band, touring. We were able to host festivals. We went on 3 different trips to Walt Disney World. A lot of great experiences for me beginning my career, and a lot of great opportunities for the students. And the quality grew too. I said those early years might not have sounded so great, but by the end, we were submitting recordings to perform at the PMEA conference. We got selected to perform at the Capitol building with a brass group. Our jazz band, when I was there, had received some superior ratings. So we were making good music by the end, and I brought in a lot of guest artists and a lot of great things. So I wasn't really looking to leave Bald Eagle at the time. It was more about finding an opportunity a little closer to where I grew up, and in a program that was a bit bigger than Bald Eagle in terms of opportunity. So then I moved to Hollidaysburg.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, with your work at Hollidaysburg now, you've been there for quite a few years. If you could tell us a little bit about your program at the senior high school.
Sure. So part of the reason I wanted to change was because I was able to teach just at the senior high school, like you said. And so that's a grade 10, 11, 12 building. And right now my teaching assignment, I guess you could say, is I have jazz band, a wind ensemble, and a concert band, and all of those ensembles meet every day during the school day, which is a huge benefit for the students. And then I also teach AP Music Theory, a course called Rock, Rap, and Revolution. I co-teach a guitar class, and we have 2 levels of guitar, an intro class and a fundamentals class. And then I also have a regular intro to music theory course too. So we've got a nice amount of electives that students can be involved with. One of my goals right now with the electives, not so much the ensembles, but the electives, is to get more students involved in the music program that aren't in band, chorus, and orchestra through this Rock, Rap, and Revolution class, through the guitar class. And I'm hoping that we can get a music technology or a music production type class rolling here next school year. So really trying to reach out there. The bands do very well. I've been very pleased with the music in terms of the quality and the level that they're able to perform. And they, over the years, it just continues to grow, and it seems to get better. And we have a great team in place with our junior high school band director, and then our elementary folks who teach band. We really try to work together as a team. And very exciting, as a matter of fact, just in the last 2 weeks, I put in a request that we need to buy more band uniforms. So we're marching this year about 147 students, which is up about maybe 20 kids more, and from last year. And the projections, even with about a 10% attrition rate, we're looking like we're going to grow by another 30 or 40 kids, and we could be somewhere marching in the realm of 165 to 175 in the next couple of years. So it seems to be something that the students find value in their time with the band, and so lots of good things.
Okay, great, wonderful. Well, now that you mentioned, with both of the programs you have worked with in your career, there has been a big resurgence in growth, also in numbers, but also in quality. So I didn't know if you could talk a little bit about how you have found success in building your programs within two different school settings, one being very rural in a smaller school district, then to even Holliesburg, which is in a larger area. Just if there are any similarities or if you've found any differences in working with one type of demographic to another.
Sure. I think that it's sort of a combination of things. I think the one thing in both programs, I think the students have to know you're there for them. It's always got to be kids first. And uh, I think it's easy for some folks in our profession to either maybe put their own performance first, whether that be performance on their instruments and their own careers performing. Sometimes people still like to think of themselves as the sage on the stage, where they're more interested in um, how they look conducting the group versus how the group really sounds, so I have always really try to emphasize, and I've seen other programs like this too, where if you emphasize it's the kids first, it's the kids' experience and their engagement, involvement, and that they have the opportunity to help to make decisions and really be invested in the program. I think they tell their friends, they tell their parents. It takes time, but there becomes a tradition of the program being about them. So whether I'm deciding on a halftime show for the marching band or I'm picking music for the jazz band, I am always making decisions about repertoire or about different opportunities or programs or something different, like a guest artist or a project with the kids in mind. It's always about the kids. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of growing too, I think sometimes it's a pizza party, or the old "you feed them and they will come." There is
Mm-hmm.
something, there's some truth to
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
you know
definitely. Mm-hmm.
Kids will work really hard for some pizza or some donuts or something really simple, and part of that is that they know you care. Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser, who is by far one of my close mentors and friends, used to say, or he still says, that people buy into the person. It's not that they buy into the work that they're getting ready to do. And I think about that. We ask kids to do an awful lot as band directors, whether it's their time or physical work out on the marching band field, or their mental work of trying to figure out chord changes with improvisation or some type of theory concept. And we really do ask them to work a lot. And just by human nature, they don't want to work so hard always. It's their teenagers. But I think what it is that they buy into the fact that they know you as their director care, and we care about them not just as the musician that they are, but as the person that they are. And I think that's really really big, and I think that's contributed to the growth at both schools over the years, and also in the quality. And I think I'll speak just for a second about the quality. I think that you as a director have to know what that quality is. And so we have to keep growing professionally. I try to get to as many live concerts as I can. And we're still not that far from Penn State. So just Monday night, I had students up at the Penn State Wind Ensemble and Symphonic Band concert. I think for us, just keeping our ears fresh and listening to great music and studying scores of great pieces, and just keeping trying to keep growing ourselves as musicians and not becoming complacent or stagnant, is a big help. And I think that's what helps to guide the quality, to kind of get beyond our little bubble of the world and pull your head out of the sand and see what else is going on. And that could go for other programs, high school programs too. It's not just Penn State or IUP that are close to me where I try to get to concerts, but there's so much now available through technology with everybody's live streaming concerts and programs, and I can listen to the Wind Ensemble, Wisconsin University Wind Ensemble through a live stream, or even professional symphonies now are live streaming at times. So I think it's just great to know what that quality is and then strive for that. And of course, there's lots of homework with score study and stuff like that too.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to touch base then with your work at Hollidaysburg. If anyone were to ever go to a football game on a Friday night at Hollidaysburg Senior High School, one big observation one can make about the band is the level of teamwork, the effort of collaboration, and just the close relationships with people in the band and also with the staff and director. So, how have you built a culture of teamwork and success amongst your students?
Well, I think that leadership is very important. And I think that that starts not necessarily with titles. In our band, we call them lieutenants and we have drum major and all those sorts of things. But I don't think that leadership starts with titles. I think leadership starts with respect. And I think that that's the culture that you want to work hard to develop, that it's a culture of respect of yourself and respect of others because we're all committed to trying to accomplish the goal and succeed the best that we can. And so if that's a Friday night and a football game and doing our halftime show, or if that's trying to succeed with the wind ensemble or the jazz band or the concert band, to put together a great program, a concert. I think the culture starts with respect. I think it also, along with those lines of respects, comes value. That the students know what I value based on where I'm putting my time, my money, my energy, and I know what the students value based on how they spend their money and their time and their energy. And I think if we show that we value one another, our time, our commitment, and so on, I think that helps to build that teamwork. But we do have a hierarchy, as I mentioned. We have lieutenants and so on. So I rely on those upperclassmen to help set the example for the underclassmen and to welcome them on board and make them feel part of what we do and feel very connected. And I think that's another big key to success is that every student in the band feels connected to their section, to other band members, maybe to their grade. So sometimes we do certain things where, obviously there's a lot of senior stuff that happens, but we try to do things with our freshmen, with our sophomores, um, and with the juniors. So little things like next Friday is senior night. And so all the underclassmen, we have this tradition where all the underclassmen make posters for every senior. So and then my staff, while we're off doing our senior night pregame stuff, the staff decorates the band room with all these posters. And so when we get back on Friday night, it's this big kind of party in the band room after that last home game, and everybody gets to see their poster and just visit, and it's just a really special time. And so I think building traditions help.
I would like to pause for a moment to encourage your support in helping our audience grow. As this podcast is brand new, we rely on the help of our listeners to expand our audience base. Please share our episodes with others who may enjoy our content and be sure to like us on Facebook for updates on all future episodes. Now back to the interview. So, aside from your work in Hollidaysburg, one thing that you have been known for over the past decade, and probably even longer, is your work as an officer and advocate at the regional, state, and national level for music education. So, with that, if you could please tell us a little bit about your work as a leader at those different levels with the region, state, and national level, and the different organizations you have been affiliated with.
Sure. So I was very early in my career, in third year of teaching. Bob Dreyfall, who happened to be the choir director at State College, was serving as the PMEA District 4 president. And someone resigned as his vice president. And so they needed somebody to fill that, and they were going to have an election. I forget, if it was a special election or somehow it came up. And he called me. And honestly, I'd only been teaching for 3 years. I knew who Bob was. I knew he was a great guy and had a great program. Um, but I really didn't know him well. I had done some of the PMEA festivals with my own students for those first couple years, but I was really kind of taken back that he would call me and ask me to run in the election for the PMEA District 4 vice president. I was like, wow, okay. And I talked to my wife, and we were just married. I was very young. And I said, okay. So I ran in the election and I won. And I was really kind of surprised. But I will say this as I get along with this story, that I have always had a mind for service. I have always wanted to serve the profession of music education in any capacity that I could. And that could just be, helping somebody stuff folders at a festival, and, getting ready to set up a room. I was that band kid in high school that was always hanging around the band room afterwards, helping my band director do whatever little task needed done. And, so I've always had that kind of service mind about me. So I said, sure. And so, like I said, I won the election. And so I served as District 4 president. And all these different things that I'll tell you about are 6-year terms. You're 2 years as the president elect, 2 years as the president, and then 2 years as the past president. And they all have varying degrees of time involvement. But so I first started out serving as District 4 president, which meant that I got to serve on the PMEA state board. So my term ended there, and as I was finishing up my time at Bald Eagle in those first 8 years of my career, I also served as the PMEA curriculum instruction chair. And I had an interest in curriculum at that point because I was doing some work at Bald Eagle writing curriculum. And so when I left Bald Eagle, I had to resign as the CI chair for PMEA District 4. Moved to Hollidaysburg, and within a year, they had asked me if I would run for the District 6 presidency.
Wow.
And I said, okay, sure, I'll run. So I was elected PMEA District 6 president. But in the meantime, I got a call from Rich Victor, who is a past PMEA state president. And he said, hey, Scott, we're having an election for state president. Would you consider running? And I thought, oh my gosh. Okay, I talked to my wife again, and now this time I had a daughter who was pretty little, and they were very, very supportive. And I will say this up front to all of this: I could never do this without the support from my family, my parents, my wife for certain, and my daughter now. Could not do it without their support. So I ended up being the youngest person ever elected to serve as the president of PMEA, state president.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've heard a lot of people too even comment. People that I have known that have been previous state presidents or even district presidents within the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association is that a lot of times, as you mentioned, with the support of your wife making it possible, really it's a lot like working a second full-time job in some aspects, especially when it's close to the state conference, festival season, and etc.
Yeah, it is. It comes in waves, but you're right. There's a lot of time involved. And as the state president, there's an awful lot of, that was like daily calls to the office, daily decisions that need to be done. I started out as your 2 years as the president elect for the state, you're planning the conference. And so I had 2 years to plan great big conferences. And that was exciting. I love doing that work because through all of this, you get to meet great people. And I think that's the biggest benefit to me is just getting to see what other people are doing, what's going well. Maybe you can help them and give suggestions. And, it's really about connecting. To me, this whole thing with PMEA and then my service with NAFME and some of the other things that I've been able to do is always, always, always about connecting with other people and how music can bring people together. So did the PMEA state presidency thing, got to serve as the state president of PMEA. You get to serve on the Eastern Division NAFME board. And so by being the state president, I would go to these fall division meetings and summer division meetings, and I got to know a lot more about the national organization. And I was, very humbled and honored to be nominated to run for the Eastern Division presidency, which I right now am finishing that year 6. This is my last year as past president, and so I'm finishing up my 6-year term with the national. And with that, I've had tremendous opportunities to travel, presented at conferences in Europe, all over the country. I've presented at national conferences on various topics, and I can get in a little bit more to some of the other projects that I've done for both PMEA and the national. But I've been the coordinator for the All National Honors Ensembles for the last 5 years, and that has been a really amazing opportunity for me as well as for the students that get to perform. In some of the greatest musical moments that I've ever heard high school students be able to do. It's just been phenomenal. It's really life changing, and to work with some of the best conductors in the world. Um, that experience in that program is just really pretty phenomenal. Um, and then, I'm still working with PMEA too. I coordinate the Leadership Academy for PMEA for people that want to get more involved and become leaders in PMEA. I've also been the co-chair for the Model Curriculum Framework project that is now out and available for music teachers across Pennsylvania, that aligns the national standards that were revised in 2014 with our state standards, and has a tremendous amount of resources for directors to write curriculum, to write assessments, to build assessments, and even revise just how they instruct and how they teach in what I would consider more of a modern or 21st century way. And the key to some of these different projects, whether that be the National Honors Ensembles or the Model Curriculum Framework here in Pennsylvania, it's really about trying to look at music education in the same way that so much of these reforms have taken place in language arts and in English and math and science, with some of the standardized testing and some of the emphasis that's put into STEM. We've really tried to put that same rigor and that same expectation for achievement that's in these tested subjects in music education. And so we have model cornerstone assessments, an opportunity to learn standards, and so many other resources that are available for music teachers. And so that's been one of my main focuses, I guess you could say, over the last couple of years, has been to make people aware of what's out there. And as I said, the old sage on the stage mentality for the band director world really is evolving and changing, and it's exciting because back to what I said way a long time ago about trying to get students engaged and students invested in their music education. I think some of the things that are in these standards and assessments and so on are completely geared to do that. That it's not that it's the music teacher has to reinvent the wheel. You're still teaching band, you're still conducting, but it's more process driven and more student focused than the conductor standing up there saying, you missed B flat, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, drill and kill. So anyhow, lots, I could go on and on and on and on about these, the different organizations and some of the things that are happening that are really exciting in music education. But I've been incredibly blessed to have had these opportunities to meet people, to connect with people, to learn from people.
Okay, great. The one thing that stuck out to me that you were mentioning was working with the Leadership Academy through PMEA. I didn't know if you could talk a little bit about that program and where it is set up to develop leaders to go out and effectively lead students. What kind of things do you consider when making up the curriculum for that program? And then also, what is your end product? So if someone graduates from the program, what do you want them to be able to know, and what do you want them to be able to do?
Sure. Yeah, sure. The Leadership Academy is designed for any music teacher and PMEA member, music teacher in Pennsylvania that is interested in serving. It's really about trying to bring them on board and giving them opportunities to grow and get that knowledge base so then they can serve music education. So we have it designed in 4 modules. and it goes through the course of a school year. So it starts in the summer at the PMEA Summer Conference, and that's more of a just get to know you and say hello and explain the program a little bit. So it starts in the summer conference, getting to know you, and then we have 4 modules, and the modules are done throughout the school year, and it's all online. So there's a little bit of a reading or educational experience component, and then there's an online virtual meeting discuss time where we get and talk, but we don't have to drive across the state or anything. So the first module is all about the structure and goals and benefits of PMEA and NAFME. The second module is all about service to effective service and how to be a good board member and how to be a good leader in the sense of duties to the association and that sort of thing. So there's like a lot of best practices and that sort of thing that we look at in terms of the associations and what makes an effective association or organization. So we look at it's more about structure and governance and things like that. The third module is all about leadership style, kind of the tips and tricks for effective leadership. We usually have a guest speaker in, whether that be like the national president or sometimes Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser, as I've mentioned, he gets on the call. But we that's one of my favorites because that really helps people to kind of discover within themselves the type of leader that they are. And some folks are introverts and think, well, I'm not going to be an effective leader, but that's quite a myth in leadership. It doesn't mean you have to be Mr. Charismatic out in front of the group, with the big personality. It's really about building those connections and relationships that makes leadership effective. And then the fourth module, we usually let up to the Leadership Academy participants to, if there's something they want to learn more about. But lately we have been focused on culturally responsive music teaching and what it means to really be effective in the area where you teach and how to take the culture from that area and be relevant to the students and responsive to the students who are in your school, in your environment. And that things along those same lines are, access to music, equity amongst music opportunities within their school or within the state, things with diversity and so on. So that's been our focus here the last couple of years on this fourth module. And then, as I said, of course, if there's other things, but the end goal, what we want are people that are have some background in what PMEA and NAFME are all about. And then the end goal is to find places for them to serve. And so this is all driven by strategic planning. So they know what PMEA strategic plan is. They study that. They study, what it's like to serve PMEA, whether that be on a committee, a council, the PMEA state board, maybe running for a district president or something. So we really try to equip them with the knowledge and the resources to know where to go. And then it's up to them to say, yeah, I am going to take the next step. I really see myself helping out with the festival task force, or I see myself wanting to be involved with conference planning or, whatever it might be.
Okay, great. So, one last thing I wanted to touch on with your work as a national president. As you said, you get to travel around a lot, meet and connect with a lot of different people. So, with your work as a national president, traveling to a lot of different states and working with a lot of respective states, music educators, state associations, what have you learned from working with these different groups? And with that work and what you've learned, have you taken anything into your own teaching practice?
Sure. One thing I just want to point out is I have not been the national president.
Oh, yes.
I've been that's okay. I've been a division president. There's the country's divided into 6 divisions. So I've been the Eastern Division president, which represents 13 states. So it's a big division. And Europe is the Department of Defense schools in Europe are part of that too. But anyhow, to your question there, I've learned so much that, music education, there are core elements of quality music education, but it can manifest itself in so many different ways. And so I think one of the things that I learned early on with this service was that I had stereotypes in my mind. I had stereotypes in my mind about inner city kids and what it meant to be a music student, or the lack of music that was in inner cities, and that's just not true. I had stereotypes about what rural Vermont's music education was going to be like, and I found that just wasn't true. So I think one of the biggest things for me was it really broadened my perspective and gave me a lot more appreciation um, for teachers who make a difference in their kids' lives. And I think that's, I started talking about that a half an hour ago, and I still think that's the biggest difference, is that teachers make a difference in kids' lives, and that can happen anywhere. That can happen in inner cities, that can happen in suburbia, that can happen in towns like Hollidaysburg, or that can happen in rural Maine. There's great people make a difference for kids' lives, and so I've taken a lot of that into my own, and certainly, I've been able to attend a lot of conferences, and so a lot of different professional development things that I've seen, composition programs that are out there. I've taken that back. My knowledge and understanding of things like the standards has certainly grown, and I've brought that back to my program. Concepts, like broad concepts like inclusion and diversity. I've really opened my eyes to the diversity that's right there under my nose in my own school district, and making sure that I work hard to include all students in our programs. As I said earlier, I'm trying to get more students involved in music, but not necessarily the traditional band, choir, orchestra. I would love for kids to be able to find and unlock their own creative potential, whether that be in music technology or maybe rock band or some other type of modern band world. Um, so I'm really committed to that. So I've been out and about having these different experiences at conferences and meetings and so on, I brought a lot of that back. And as I said, you make these connections with great people, and so I've been able to tap in to some of the resources and build relationships that I've been able to utilize at Hollidaysburg as well. So it's just all about connecting.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one other achievement that I wanted to talk about, and a recent achievement too, and an honor, is for those listeners that are not familiar with your work, Scott has just been named and selected as a semifinalist for the Grammy Music Educator Award this year. So again, congratulations on that. But I didn't know if you could talk about that a little bit, just a little bit about the process, or a little bit about what goes into that.
Well, I will just say I'm incredibly humbled to be this far along. Anybody can be nominated as a Grammy Music Educator nominee, and this year, once kind of the dust settled, there were almost 3,000 nominations. And it starts out with a questionnaire, and so I filled out the questionnaire, and from there you can be selected based on how you answer the questions. The committee, and I'm not even sure really who's on the committee or how it's decided, but based on those questionnaire, you can get not narrowed down from that initial 2,800 or whatever it was down to a quarterfinalist, which is the top 200. So I found out at the end of the school year last year in May that I was a quarterfinalist. And so from there, you're invited to submit more materials. And so you can submit essays or videos with a variety of questions, kind of similar to what you're doing here with this, where they want to know more about you and more about what you believe. And you can get other people to be part of your videos and kind of speak on your behalf as testimonials and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, um, so I submitted my video, submitted my work, and just recently found out, yeah, that I was moved on into the top 25 as a semifinalist. And then I'll find out in December if I'm a finalist, which is the top 10, and then the Grammys are in February. So I'm, there's a lot of great people out there, a lot of great music teachers, and as I said, I'm excited. I'm very, very honored, but more than anything, I'm humbled to have been moved on out of almost 3,000 people to be in the top 25. So it's great. The biggest thing, my biggest takeaway from the whole thing, I will say, is that I think it's awesome that the Grammys, who is the music industry, has created this award. It's been 5 years. This coming year will be six, to recognize music education, because we know there's a correlation there between music education and the music industry in terms of developing the passion, the love, the talent that goes into the music industry and the artists that are out there on the top 20 and so on. And so my biggest takeaway has been the support that's and the connection and the bridge that's being built between the two factors of the music educators and the music industry.
Wonderful. Yeah, that is quite the honor, and we'll be making sure to keep pulling for you all the way up until things as they develop in December. So, if you
Thank
need
you
anyone to
very
go
much.
with you, you can certainly take a couple guests with you if you like. So,
Thank
anyway,
you.
to go into our next part, is one of the big things that I think you have established as an advocate for music education is your stance on advocacy. This is something you have written articles on for NAFME, you've given keynote speeches, and even presentations at many conferences. So, with that said, I wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit on your philosophy on advocacy for music educators.
Well, I think advocacy. I'm just going to have you. I could talk for 2 hours on advocacy, but I'll give you a couple quick things. I think number one, it's all about building relationships, and it is working ahead before crisis management. This is advocacy is not about handling a crisis. Advocacy is about building the long-term sustainability of music programs in schools. And I think it's about trying to involve and involve as many people as you can by building a good network and a good coalition with parents and boosters and all that sort of thing. And you want to be able to influence decisions and policies. And so I think that's what advocacy really is. And it really happens at the local level. So you can get a lot of great information from NAFME, from PMEA. There's a lot of great people out there that are doing policy work and on all these sorts of things with the ESSA legislation that was passed. Um, Lots of great things with advocacy, but it comes down to doing it at your school at the local level, building relationships, and making sure that people are aware and understand what it is that a quality music education is all about. And that comes from curriculum, from standards, from staffing, and having room and support and schedules that support music education. So that there's a lot there, and I don't want to get too much into a whole nother topic, because that could be a whole nother episode for this idea, which I'd be happy to come back on another time and talk about. But I think that it's just about building those relationships and long-term relationships. It's not having one meeting or going to one school board meeting or having one meeting with an administrator. It's about just taking that time to have that positive understanding of what it is that helps to sustain a music program. And that's really what it's all about. That's what advocacy is.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, to end up our session here, what we do is we have a list of general questions that we ask all guests on the show. So, to start out, focusing on leadership, for you personally or professionally, what leaders have inspired you in your career, and what lessons have you taken away from them?
Well, I have a variety of people. I've mentioned Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser. I remember being in high school, going to a leadership clinic of his, and it was just phenomenal. He just blew me away. And part of it is his gift of building relationships, and I think that's one of the things that I've taken from him over these years. He was a star in my mind when I was a kid, and through college, I got to see him at clinics and things, and then as a professional, I got to work with him and go to sessions at PMEA conferences. And now, I would consider Tim a friend, because over these years, he has supported me personally in a lot of different endeavors that I have done. And I'll get regular text messages from him, just saying hello or checking in. And there's some things on the horizon potentially that he and I are trying to look together to work together towards. In terms of really launching some type of advocacy program across the country. And it's a few years away, but Tim's influence and Tim's support, and back to that lesson of building relationships, I think is just something that's huge. I mentioned Dennis Glocky as a mentor at Penn State University. He helped me in those early years, really developing my own musicianship and developing the music program is. And I think I've had some great opportunities, as I've talked about. But if my program at school wasn't doing well, I couldn't be on the road traveling and doing all these other things. And Dennis really helped me to understand what it means to develop fundamentals, and how to teach kids to play well and make good music, and does it sound good, really just basic fundamental questions that you have to ask yourself as a music teacher. And how do you get them there, and and how do you get those sounds to sound good and things like that. And Dennis was just hugely impactful. I mentioned my family, certainly, a tremendous amount of support. My wife inspires me every day, in terms of her support for me and what she does in her own career as a chemist and as a mom. It's a true partnership that we have, and that's a huge inspiration. I talk about building relationships, and I would say, through my family and my colleagues, building partnerships, and we're in it together. All of my colleagues that I had at Bald Eagle and that I have now, I would consider to be, huge influences on my career. Every one of them has shaped me into who I am. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Casey Teskey at Clarion University, who, I was kind of this cocky trumpet player, and he really taught me what it meant to, be accountable, to be accountable to an ensemble, but to be an accountable musician. I was pretty cocky and had a lot of things to say to him when he showed up at Clarion University, because I was a senior when he came and he was new. But boy, did he open my mind into what music was across the country. And I didn't know who Bob Reynolds was, or who Gene Corporon was, or what the Midwest Clinic was. I really didn't know much of anything. I just thought I could play some high notes on the trumpet and get a little bit of recognition. And Dr. Teskey really expanded my mind really quickly. And it was some fun lessons to be learned. Those are some stories for off the record, but of what that was all about. I could go on and on, and I feel bad naming names because I know there are names that I'm not going to mention. There's my PMEA mentors, Margaret Bauer, Fran Nesta, Chuck Neidhart, Rich Victor, Dave Cree, all those folks, and my NAFME mentors as well. Bob Frampton, huge impact. Bob Frampton was the Eastern Division president before I was, and he was just a tremendous mentor. And what he taught me was to take time to think before you react, and take time to think before you give decisions, because the things that you're doing at the national level could potentially impact an awful lot of stuff. And Bob really taught me to slow down sometimes and think things through. And so I feel like I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm always trying to take away the best of what I can from every situation, every opportunity I'm given. So it's really pretty. I feel so blessed to have the opportunities that I've had. And I have to say too, before I wrap this question up, is that my faith has been a big part of it, and I'm a person that really believes that you have to do things for the right reasons, and make sure that it's not to self-serve and just to add something to your resume, but you're doing it because you're trying to make a difference in the lives of others and in your students' lives and things like that. And so my mentors have just inspired me so much in so many different ways to be the person I am today.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a great breadth of experience that you've had with those people. With our next question, so speaking of leaders, this is more of a question sometimes you may hear in a job interview, but to kind of get the overall scope of philosophy on leadership of directors, What are three words you would use to describe an outstanding leader of a comprehensive music program, whether it be in a rural area, as you said, up in Maine, or in a large city school band system down in Texas? What are three characteristics or words you would think would describe all educators in that field?
I think for educators to be successful, in those types of programs, I think you have to have vision. I think you have to be looking forward, learn from the past, but have an eye towards the future. And I think so having a vision for what is next and what is going to be the most appropriate and responsive for your students is critical. My second word, I think, would be have to have energy and vibrance, and you just have to love music. You have to love music education. You have to love children, and you have to bring that passion every day. And it doesn't matter where you're at. You've just got to have that. Are there days where you're tired? Sure. Are there days where you don't feel well? Sure. Are there days you have bad meetings or something else that ticked you off? Absolutely. But for me, I quickly put those things away because I can't wait to be able to have time with the kids and get to make music and expand them, to have them discover what they didn't think was possible, or to expose them to something new that they never heard before. So that passion is just incredibly important. And for my third one, and this might sound maybe simple, but I think just to an outstanding leader is knowledgeable. You take the time to listen, you take the time to learn, you take the time to understand. And to me, all those things, equate to knowledge. And so I think that, a great leader, no matter where you are and what your teaching load is or what type of comprehensive program you're trying to build, you got to know your stuff. And I think that is that knowledge base. And it comes from really trying to understand situations, trying to understand maybe it's a piece of repertoire, but you've got to be in the know. So I think that would be my third one. So vision, passion, and knowledge.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, another question that we have is, with current trends in education, maybe even just those not pertinent to music, but education as a whole across the country, what advice would you give to music educators to help their students thrive regardless of their location or the type of school they may be in?
Well, I started off by saying kids first. And so I think you have to look at the situation that the kids are in and within the culture and the context of your community. And that's how you start there. And so in terms of thrive, I think you have to decide, what are those goals? Is it to have more kids engaged in music? Is it to make your band bigger? Is it to make your band better? So you have to have goals. But you can't have a goal that's not appropriate for the culture and the context of the kids that are in your classroom. So I think that that's where you start. You really start by understanding where the students are at and who they are, and then taking them on that journey to discover the creativity within themselves and how to collaborate with others and think critically about music. And I know I'm kind of hitting on the four C's there, but that's what it's really about. It's about being a musician in the 21st century, and that might be a little different than how you and I went through our college and how we were brought up. But my advice would be to really look through that lens of cultural responsiveness and start there. And I think the answers are easier to find about what to do if you know why you're doing it, and you know who you're doing it for.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that is one thing that I think about a lot too, is focusing on the why. So, to wrap things up here, then, our last question, this might be a little abstract, but ultimately with our profession, like any other, there has to be a day where we eventually, and all puns intended, pass the baton. So, whenever the day comes when you set to retire from your career as an educator, how would you like to be remembered amongst your students, colleagues, everyone in the community and everyone involved to reflect on you on your work as a leader for your music program?
That's a tough question because I think everybody takes something personal from others. So to try to sum it up, I think that if I had one word to sum it up, it's just love. I would want the students and my colleagues to know that I loved them, and I truly mean that I care deeply about them as people, that I care deeply about their education, that I gave my whole heart and soul to my students, and as well as to my colleagues and my program and the school district and my community. I just think that it's just so important to give all that you have, and I would say that to my family too. It's that love and deep commitment to our profession, to my family, to my friends, to my students. I think that if that were to be my legacy, it would be that I gave everything that I had to give until I couldn't give anymore.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that wraps up our interview session. So, Scott, again, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and especially it's an honor to have you as our first guest. So, what we'll be making sure to do is up all the way again until December. Make sure we're following and supporting you all the way up until hopefully the Grammy Awards. So, looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
This concludes our first episode. Thank you to Mr. Scott Sheehan for his time, insight, and all that he does to advance our profession. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share our show with others on social media. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to turn in to the next edition of Director's Circle.